Hallo und herzlich willkommen zur 30-Minuten-WG von Stern und Penguin Random House. Herzlich willkommen auf der Frankfurter Buchmesse. Ich freue mich auf unseren nächsten Gast, Kiko Amat aus Barcelona. A warm welcome, Kiko Amat. Thanks for being here.
Thanks
So
everyone. Hello.
Now we're going to talk in English. Even
Great.
that's not our mother's tongue. You are Spanish,
fine,
I'm a
fine.
German, but
We-
we'll do our very best.
We can do that. We can do
Okay,
that.
I think so
easily.
too.
Piece of cake.
Well, you know, just reading about you, about your personal background, makes me really curious about
Okay.
you. Because it all starts with a picture. There's a picture in the back of the book, and he's like shaking his head all the time. And why did you choose that kind of photo?
There's no intellectual reason. I'm naturally fidgety, so I move a lot, and I thought the picture had the creepy quality that I wanted for the.
It's really creepy because, and it's
a bit creepy. Yeah.
It's
fine.
fantastic for the book.
Yeah.
And you're from Barcelona, not directly from the city Barcelona, but from a kind of a suburban.
Yeah, I'm from the outskirts of Barcelona, industrial outskirts. I come from a place that went from having, 10,000 people in the 50s to 80, 90,000. And it's a very rough area, quite violent. And it also had the biggest mental hospital of Catalonia and of Spain, maybe. So all my youth and my childhood was spent surrounded by
mental illness?
By mental illness, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And your
I was
mother-
going to say crazy people, but mental
Okay.
illness is way more correct.
Okay, and your mother, she was working as a
Yeah,
nurse in the
yeah.
hospital.
My mom also, to make it even worse or better, my mom worked at the mental hospital. So I had a direct connection, not only in the streets, because the mental people came, had a regime of free walking around the town. So they mixed with the local population, and so that my town was full of crazy of people who had serious mental problems, and we always mix with them, and you live with them, and as you said, to make it even worse, my mom worked there, so I went to visit her, and it was shocking to see some people who lost completely their marbles, and they were broken. That's what they were. They were broken. They're torn inside and broken. And
Were they treated well, or was it just like,
No, they were
like a
treated-
prison in a way?
No. They were treated. I mean, it was a progressive environment, but that didn't make it less shocking for a 8-year-old, because you're very small, and then you see people who've gone through through a frontier of mental illness, and they've become something else. And I didn't understand the whole thing until I was more grown up, and then when I wrote Troime, I had to rethink about all that mental people that I live with.
Okay, but still, let us just talk a little bit about you. You were like 17 years old when you quit school? So
Yeah,
you're...
I'm as far as Spanish literature goes, I am, I suppose, a bit of rare abyss or an oddity, because in terms of class, I think Spanish writers tend to come from educated or middle, even upper middle class, and I come from working class origins. As Chris Offutt, a writer I really like, says, in my valley, nobody finished high school, and in my town, nobody finished high school either. None of my friends went to university, neither did I. And so I come from a roughish working class, 100% working class hometown, where there were no artists whatsoever, or no
academic background.
academic
in a way,
background,
no-
and nobody surrounding us had any inklings or any inclination towards an academic or an artistic life. So that doesn't mean that I didn't have contact with other forms of expression that were as meaningful to me as could have been fucking college education, which were I come from punk rock. I come from the hardcore scene. I come from subculture, and rock and roll and punk rock and working
You
class.
were a mod.
I was a mod as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Still?
I was a no. That's a. I think that's a teenage thing.
Yeah, you're right. I
It's a
really
teenage-
looked it up. It's a kind of teenage thing.
It's a teenage thing.
It's
And I
like
was-
but what was mentioned here?
I was a kid. I was 15, and I signed for the mod subculture for a few years, and that provided me with an alternative education, and so did punk rock and subcultures. So I was in contact with a different kind of education, and also, as probably can be seen in my book, my place is very rich in orality. Is that the word? The way people speak.
Yes.
Everyone told stories. None of us were educated, but I come from a culture where everyone tells stories all the time. In a way, it's similar to the Irish. I mean, everyone aggrandizes and makes it bigger than what happened to them the night before, and every story becomes a tale, and it becomes a sort of bravado thing that you have to make it bigger than the other one. So I come from a culture of people who spoke all the time, and who were so bored that couldn't do anything but speaking, because there were no clubs, nor cinemas, no nothing. So you had to speak and get drunk and take lots of drugs.
Okay, I love see you talking with your hands. I really like that. I really like that a lot.
It's very Latin,
So, yeah,
I think.
you really have a very interesting background. You sold records. You worked for McDonald's. You were working on a camping site. You did work for as a waiter in a big hotel. So you really saw a lot before you started writing. Is that right?
Yeah. Because, well, as I was saying before, since I didn't go to college, but I wanted to be a writer at some point. But then
When did you know that you wanted to become a writer?
But I was, I don't know, 13 or something. I was very small. I was a kid, but then there was no examples. There was no physical examples of anyone you could have as someone you look up to and see, this guy comes from the same environment as I do. So he became a writer, so maybe I could become a writer. And there was such a person didn't exist. I had no one to look up to.
Role model, nothing.
Nothing at all. So then I sort of forgot my idea, my dream of being a writer, and I spent, like the rest of my friends, the next 10 to 15 years just working in shit jobs. That's what I did. Shit jobs, and I worked in a car factory as well. I lived in London for a while, and I sold records, but I didn't do. But I never stopped writing. I was not published, but I never stopped writing, which is it's different being published than writing.
But are you a colleague? Are you working? Did you work for magazines, for newspapers?
Yeah, no, I did. I created fanzines, which were like fan magazines, do it yourself basically, created for you and some 100 fans, tops, and yeah, I ended up doing reviews of records for magazines and stuff, but nothing fiction related until while I was living in London, I decided that I wanted, after all those years, when I was 30 or something, that I had to start writing novels, because that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid. So I made up my mind, and I tried to write a novel, and it worked, and I haven't stopped.
So luckily for us, he started writing, because the way he talks, he's writing. That's the way the book is read in German. So that's great to see you talking, because that's exactly how he describes his characters. There is Kuro.
Yep.
Well, first he's like a 12-year-old boy,
Yep.
and then we see him as a broken man in his late 40s, because
Yep.
he became insane in a way. He's maniac. He's in the mental hospital.
Yeah, he had a psychotic episode.
And it's all about his there's this one special summer in his youth when he was 12 years old, and it's all about his family. It's all about his parents.
Troime, it's a bit of a difficult book for me, because it took me a while, way longer than it usually takes. And it's also, besides of there's a writing in the first page which says that I made up all this. I don't know how,
Yeah,
how is it in German? How is it in German?
in German it says, ich habe mir das alles ausgedacht.
That's
And he has to make it sure, for sure.
yeah, and it's a blatant, it's a complete lie because not all of it happened to me, but quite a lot of it, and
This all happened to you?
not all of it, but it's inspired in some things that happened in my life.
Wow.
And,
Now I'm really curious.
besides of the psychotic episode,
Okay.
I didn't get to the psychotic episode. Everything pointing to the psychotic episode sort of happened to me, and I decided to write this disclaimer because most of the people that appears in the book, they're still alive, and I didn't want to spoil Christmas for everyone. So I decided to put a disclaimer, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to throw people off the track with just a disclaimer, because my dad read the book twice and he said it was brilliant and amazing, and none of the things that are told in my book are nice, and they are all about, most of them are about
No,
my
there's
family.
nothing nice at all, I have to
No,
say. In
no.
the end, it's really like beton. It's gray. There's a lot of types of gray. It's in there, you know.
Yep.
And Kuro is a very special boy. He has this tics. He has like an Asperger syndrome. So he's kind of a very special boy. But he grows up in an environment where nobody really helps him. Where nobody really realizes
Yeah.
that this is just the way he is. He's always, mistreated for his being. He
Yeah.
has to tick all the time in order to get along, and but nobody helps him out in a way.
Yeah, because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, way before there was any idea that you have to be compassive or you have to be nice with people who had, I don't know, disabilities or something. And my 70s were a really rough patch they were way more violent than the 50s and 60s in Spain. There was lots of junkies as well. And if you were a bit, now we've seen the triumph, the coronation of the nerd. But I lived in a period where nerds were mercilessly fucked and destroyed.
Yes.
If you were a sensitive kid and you didn't like sports, or you were not very good at sports, or you were shit at sports, as I was, and you like, war games and stuff like that, you are mercilessly smashed. And I remember it as a very violent period. The dialectics and the words were violent. The way, I don't know, gay people or disabled people were described were appalling. Things that if you said them now, you'd end up in prison. I mean, disparaging and very abusive words. And that's the environment I naturally grew up in. And that's the way Curro lives, which is a sensitive kid, a bit weird. Now he'd be treated...
He's been beaten up by his elder brother.
Beaten up constantly by his younger brother, which is even worse. No, he's older. He's
No,
older.
he's
Yes.
older.
I changed that, so it didn't ruin Christmas as well. So he's older.
And the marriage of his parents is like in
Yeah.
a really, really bad state.
Yeah, he lives in a dysfunctional family where everyone is yelling and fighting all the time, which is not very good for his nerves.
He always has to tick then.
Exactly. And for his already nervous state, it gets worse because of the constant fighting that he sees in the house and the constant beatings that his brother submits him to. And so that's the way he grows up. And he has only one friend, Priu.
Priu is also very special. He's
Yeah.
he's coming from a very, I would say, disembled
and
and
even
parents,
poorer.
And and the way he tells us, he describes these two boys, those boys in their were like 11, 12 years old, is really painful in a way, because
Yeah.
you do it so exactly, you describe them so well that I really had to open up the window once, because I felt it like smelling, because it's not so nice
Yeah.
how they look. Priu is always, biting on his nails, and I really like, oh my
He's-
God.
He's very hairy for a
he's-
13-year-old.
Yeah, they don't wash their hairs. They smell. You know how boys
Yep.
can be in that age, and you really had a point there. I mean, it's kind of terrible in a way.
Yeah, and also, I think from an Eagle point of view, from a different class, sometimes working class is tend to be seen as a, homogeneous or an environment that it's the same, but it's not. It's very atomized. There's lots of different stages. There's a lumpen proletariat, and there's like sort of lower middle, and there's lots of differences. And Priu and Curro, they are worth poor kids from working class environments, but there's difference between them. They are different. They come from different. Priu is even poorer than Curro, so it's something.
He's underneath in a way, and they have a
And
really.
Curro knows it.
Yeah, they know it, and Priu knows it himself too, and they have a weird sort of friendship because they're really close friends,
Yeah.
but they're always the losers.
Yeah.
At that moment, they enter school. They are just there to be dissed by other
Yeah.
classmates, and it's of course clear that nobody, not Priu or either crew, will help the other one. It's all about getting to run away in a way.
It's very important this, and it's good that you mention it, because I wanted to all costs to avoid the poetic justice image of the losers that stick together. That's not the way I saw it.
They are always running. One of them is always running away.
Every man for himself.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me it was very important to describe Curro and Priu like a symbiotic environment where they help each other, but if things turn ugly, they leave because they are also selfish and they have self-preservation, and they are not heroic in any delusional way. They're not heroes. They're the opposite of heroes. They're frightened little kids. So for me, it's a very important piece in the book when Curro is being beaten up and Priu runs, which is what would happen in fucking real life. In Hollywood, Priu would come and defend Curro against the jocks, and that's not that in real life. That hardly ever happens. What I always saw was run for your life, and that's the way it is. They are selfish because they are human. They are not saints.
And it's really pretty clear if there would show up some better friend in a way who's much higher in the ranking, they will leave each other. They will no longer be friends because they just stick together because there's nobody else who would like to be the friend of the other one. So.
Exactly, and this doesn't appear in the book. But if by any chance there was someone lower than them, they would destroy him as well. That's the life they live in. I mean, they live in a jungle, and they are not, as I said, they are not saints. So that's a reflection of humanity, I think.
But on the other hand, Curro is very sensitive. He's the one who realizes what's going on in his family with his brother and with the parents, and he's really destroyed in a way because he's the one who's like a catalyst, like a catalysator for the destroyed or this mismarriage of his parents.
Well, the story of Curro comes from a real story in a way that happened next to my house when someone had a psychotic breakdown in front of a potato chips bar, and he went berserk. That's the actual name. Going berserk or having a berserk attack, and he stabbed people in the street. That was 100 meters from where I live, and he stabbed people on the street, and he had to be put down. I mean, that's something that the place I come from is violent, but not that violent, and he had to be put down by the police. They didn't kill him, and that happened very near my place, but I never knew what happened to that kid. So he ended up, because there was lots of rumors and myth, but I didn't know. So in a way, Troime is going back in time and trying to write about everything that happened to that fictional boy until he ended up stabbing people madly in the street. So what thing after thing after thing until they break him. I mean, he's broken by by the environment, by his shit family, by his shit friends or people at school, and so he loses it, and he loses it in a massive way, and he becomes an schizophrenic, which also runs in the family because it's a genetic thing.
His grandfather had
Yeah,
been,
yeah.
he had been insane. He had been in the
Yeah,
mental
yeah.
hospital. His mother is kind of nearby going.
Yeah,
She has her own perception of the reality.
Yeah, his grandpa had his fictional grandpa had another schizophrenic attack in the Civil War, in the Spanish Civil War, and he went running naked, and they shot him in the ass. And so madness runs in his veins, in his genetic material. So it's no surprise that after one generation, well, his mother is not very sane either, and she's morbidly obese, and she's a very unhappy person. And so he has madness is coming to him through the genetic material and through the environment. So he's almost, it's a compulsion. I mean, he's forced to become, to end up mad. That's
He's just like, he's running into the dark in a way.
absolutely.
And
I mean, there's no other way.
What's so impressing, it's not only the way you describe these boys with a very, very, very empathetic. You're very much on their side.
Yeah.
I feel like you're like the great brother, the big brother who takes care of these boys in a way. It's really, I think I've not, for a long time, haven't read about boys in that way. The way you describe them, it's very warm, it's very enthusiastic about them. And on the other way, the book is interesting because you have these back and forth going. It's just like you have two ends. There's the one end where Kuro and his friend Priyu start, and there's the other end, and it's just like a flipping back and forth all the time because you change those characters or chapters all the time. Where you have the end of Kuro, when he's like a broken man on his end 40s, and then he's in the mental hospital by himself.
Yeah.
And there he's also creating up a Luniac way of looking at his life, and so it's just like you do like a. I don't know how to say that in English, like ein Zopf, den man flichte, you put them together in a way, and that is very interesting and very dramatic in a way.
Well, the paradox here is that the easiest parts to read in my novel are the parts that happen when he's 40-something in the mental hospital. I'm a massive reader of English humor, and particularly Wodehouse, so I thought that it'd be great that this adult Kuro went mad and lived in a mental hospital and had an imaginary butler, like Jeeves sort of character in
Placido.
Yeah.
Placido is his name, yeah.
Placido. It's like a sort of Jeeves character that the reader never knows if he's made up or he exists, and I'm not going to reveal that either. But I realized that it was such a dark and violent book that it also needed a few parts when the reader could breathe a bit. And the parts where he is delusional in the mental hospital it's dark humor, but it's humor nonetheless. And so they are the comical parts of the book, which is when we see him now planning a fucking also delusional escape of a place that you cannot escape because it's open. I mean, he could walk out of the mental hospital. There's no.
He's somehow the prison is in his head in a way.
It's quixotic. I mean, many Spanish critics mentioned El Quijote, although my influence it doesn't come directly from El Quijote, but comes via England. But still, it's a quixotic endeavor, which is he's planning to escape from a mental hospital, which is not a prison. He could walk out. But he doesn't want to walk out. He's perfectly comfortable there.
He's not able to go out.
But he wants an adventure, and he's planning his escape with a butler. And those back and forth between Curro and his butler were for me the funniest pieces to write that I've ever written. It was the funniest pieces I've ever written.
Why?
Because they were humorous and they were funny. And after all, that in a way, even as a reader or as an author, you feel a certain relief that with everything bad that happened in his life, he ended up in a mental hospital with an imaginary friend, which is he could have ended up dead or I don't know, or killing someone. But he ends up in a mental hospital, living a reasonably stable, if mad, life. And I feel some sort of comfort thinking of Curro living forever in a mental hospital. You know, talking to a butler, having a fucking butler, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, and he's always well dressed. The butler is
Very well
always,
dressed.
and
Well.
he's preparing the clothes for Kuro,
Yeah.
which seems to be really crazy.
Yeah.
What I really liked also about the book is that we all, or a lot of Germans, go to Barcelona. It's a city, a big hype, you know, a lot of tourism, a lot of problems with tourism. But you show me another picture of this great city. So how important is it that it takes place in Barcelona or nearby?
The way I see it is, these are called, I imagine maybe in German they're called, in Germany they're called the same. They're called satellite, they're satellite towns, like in Britain. And they are satellites. So you have a schizophrenic mentality, again, of you're not rural, you don't live in a small town with cows. I've never seen a cow, a real one, I mean. In chocolate bars, I've seen cows, but not in actual real things. And so theoretically you're near the big city and a vibrant and modern.
You describe how they see the lights at night.
Exactly.
It's out there, but they never go there.
And it's painful in a way because you're not rural. You don't have this picturesque scenario with cows and things and good airs. And you're near Barcelona, but you're very far away from Barcelona. You're an entirely different world. But to make it even worse and to punish you, it's like a torture. You see Barcelona. You see the lights. After the last train, for me, the images of trains leaving that appear in all my books, it's a bit of the idea of the way we lived, which was seeing trains leaving our hometown, and that was the last train of the night, and you knew you were trapped. That's how you felt. You felt trapped in a place, but having a vibrant, urban, modern conurbation very near you. But it was forbidden to you because you didn't belong to the place. You came from another class, and you had no artistic, easy ways to penetrate that city. So that's the idea. You live in a satellite, and you see Barcelona, but Barcelona could be fucking miles away. It could be London for all you enjoy it, because you don't enjoy it at all. You're just trapped in a cage, which is your town, which is an ugly town as well. It was beautiful.
Barcelona was beautiful, now it's ugly?
No, my hometown.
Okay,
My hometown has always been ugly.
Okay, but
it's no downfall, always ugly.
But you still live in Barcelona after all the...
I know I live in Barcelona.
Okay,
yeah.
and how did it change? I mean, because there are so many people going out there and it's overcrowded with people.
The thing is, I didn't, as I was saying, I didn't get to see it in the 80s or early 90s. I only went there to get drunk and take drugs and go to clubs. And I didn't know the city. I didn't know it as I know my hometown, which I know it by heart. So although I can see the changes, I don't think I am entitled or I'm not the best person to discuss the changes, because I've never felt, I live there, but I've never felt Barcelonian. When I was a kid, I didn't feel that I was from Barcelona. I was from a wasteland. I was from a wasteland that was next to Barcelona, which is a delta, and it's got the beach, but it's not the Californian beach. It's like, don't picture California. It's not that kind of beach. It's another beach. And so I didn't feel like I was from that city. I was from an entirely different place with different characters, and I wouldn't say different traditions, but decidedly we lived in a different culture. So I see the changes, but it's not that I lived them in first person when I was a kid.
In the book, there are also kind of immigrants, and they are, of course, lower than the other ones. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a bit, in that particular, I'm a bit of an oddity as well, because I come from Catalan parents. Both my parents were Catalan, and my grandparents were Catalan as well, and my grandparents were Catalan. So I am, but then in the 50s and 60s, there was a massive wave of immigration, but internal immigration, which is like poor towns from the south of Spain or the central Spain. They came to the industrial areas, which was Barcelona or Catalonia. And the thing is, I ended up being best friends with all the sons of those workers that came in the 50s and 60s.
So you spoke Spanish, not Catalan.
And I ended up, speaking in Spanish with them, and they were my gang, and all my gang was 100% sons of Spanish migrants. So I'm a bit of a traitor in that sense, because I abandoned my mother tongue, which I speak. I am bilingual, but my writing language and my street language, which is more important, the insults, let's put it this way, the insults I learned them in Spanish. So if you had to put someone down, the best insults were Spanish. So those were, and the slang was mostly, the most developed slang was mostly, it came from Spain. So that was the tongue I was used to speak when I was 14, 15, 16, and that's the orality that I later applied to my novels.
Okay, that was to be seen as a traitor then?
No, that's something my
dad.
That's something my dad says.
Okay, well, this is really a great novel, and it's really interesting the way you play around with all kind of psychotic nerves, and people get insane and then they behave normal. So there's no, we are used to, decide really you're normal, you're not. You don't do that, I think.
There's a point that I remember very clearly when writing the novel, when speaking with someone who knew, I knew it from experience what mental people were, because I knew them. But I didn't know the theory behind it. And I remember talking to someone who was a psychiatrist, who described madness in a way to me that I've never heard such a thing being described, which was that if someone believes that he is Napoleon or fucking Caesar or Jesus Christ, that's not his madness. That's the way he has to cope with madness. So he has such a deep pain inside, and he's so broken inside that his only cure, the only cure that he sees available, is thinking that he's fucking Napoleon. And that for me changed, that was a change of game completely, because then I understood that all the delusions were not the madness. The delusions were only the external characterization or the physical manifestation of something that was deep inside, a breakage and a rupture, and a complete rupture, and a pain so deep that you could only face it thinking that you speak with God, and that can be seen in Troime, which there's lots of mad people walking around, and some of them are described and what happened to them, and their madness is something else. Their madness is that they were abused, or that they were raped, or that they had shit parents, or that they were whatever, or that they were genetically inclined to be mad. But them thinking that they are Jesus Christ is not the madness. And that for me was very important to realize.
So this is really a great book, and the way he's talking, this is written, so I just highly recommend to read this book. Und damit sage ich vielen Dank an alle hier und wünsche Ihnen noch viel Spaß auf der Frankfurter Buchmesse. Danke, dass Sie da waren beim Stern und bei Penguin Random House zur 30-Minuten-WG.
Danke, thank you.